I'm very pleased to welcome you on behalf of UNCTAD to this session on investing in Industry 4.0. My name is Richard Bulwin. I'm the director of the Investment Research Branch in UNCTAD. Now this session this afternoon, for us this afternoon, is one of more than 90 sessions at UNCTAD's World Investment Forum that's been taking place this week. It's one of 90, but it is arguably one that will probably attract quite a bit of attention, and that is because Industry 4.0 is one of the topics that I have heard discussed most in all of the various ministerial discussions, the various high-level sessions we've had. It is a fascinating topic. It is also one of the key factors in what was our World Investment Report last year, which talked about the expected transformation of international production as a result of various factors, but Industry 4.0 being one of the main factors, right? So digitalization in global supply chains, advanced robotics, artificial intelligence, additive manufacturing, all these factors are causing a series of changes in international production systems, with international production dictating the flow of investments, dictating the flow of goods in global trade. And well, the effects are too many to elaborate on right now. I'd invite you to look at the World Investment Report. But basically, to mention just a few, we're expecting increased trade in services, a flattening of the so-called smiley curve of global value chains, and a change in the determinants of foreign direct investment that will require different things from especially developing countries to be able to attract investment, such as a level of technological know-how, such as a certain degree, a level of digital infrastructure presence, etc. So we elaborated on that, and we elaborated on the consequences for investment promotion strategies and development strategies. So if Industry 4.0 affects FDI, it's also the other way around, of course. FDI is also a key tool to support the Industry 4.0 transition or transformation of economies and regions, right? In fact, that is why we produced, together with the ASEAN Secretariat, we produce an annual ASEAN investment report, and the 2021 report is precisely on that, on Industry 4.0, and it talks about how the region attracts foreign direct investment and how it supports the transformation to Industry 4.0. It talks about targeting investment or promoting investment in the enablers of the Industry 4.0 transition, in multinationals that have a high degree of adoption of Industry 4.0 technologies, in industries that produce the equipment, the Industry 4.0 equipment that ASEAN in some cases could be a leader in, and in how the presence of foreign affiliates can help simply in the upgrading of skills and technology present in the country. Now, this was for ASEAN, but of course, there is lessons to be learned here for other emerging markets as well. And I think that's part of the discussion today. We launched our ASEAN investment report at the ministerial in September, and we will have a presentation on it at the ASEAN Business Summit now on Monday. So it is out now, and you can find it on the websites of UNCTAD and on the websites of the ASEAN Secretariat. Now, I'll just keep my remarks brief, so I'll pass on very quickly now to our substantive discussion. I think we have an extremely impressive lineup here of speakers. Very impressed with the names and positions that I see. And in reality, it's really the typical spirit of the World Investment Forum, because we have senior level policymakers, and we have CEOs of investors and technology companies, business. We have top level think tanks, academia. So it brings together all the different strands, stakeholders that we aim to bring together during the whole week, in fact, at the World Investment Forum. So I'm very happy that we managed to do this also for this session on Industry 4.0. So thank you all very much for being with us and for sharing your experience and expertise on this. And to guide the discussion and introduce all of you, I will now hand the floor to our moderator, Ms. Laurel Ruma. Laurel, you have the floor.
Hello. Thank you very much for being here. I'm excited to join you today and looking forward to having a fantastic discussion. To start, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Laurel Ruma. I am the editorial director for the MIT Technology Review's Insight Division. The MIT Technology Review has been published by the Massachusetts Institute of Technology since 1899, making it the world's oldest technology magazine. Our interest in Industry 4.0 is pretty obvious. It is a futuristic trend that is actually happening now, and we're excited to see how it plays out in various ways across the entire world. First, I'd like to introduce our panelists today, and you can find their full biographies online. Let's see, hang on. Looks like my video is not working here. Okay, I'll fix that in a minute, please. I'd like to introduce our panelists today. You can find their full biographies on the event site, and each one will have a brief statement after our introductions. To start with, please welcome S.G. Koon Dwangjae, who's the Secretary General for the Board of Investment of Thailand. And we have Mr. Marcus Hess, who's the Deputy Director General for the Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Energy in Germany. Mr. Andreas Rodriguez Rowe is the Managing Director for Invest Chile. And Mr. Yunus Hussain is the Acting Head of Inward Investment Attraction Facilitation and Aftercare in Invest South Africa. Finally, Mr. Lucas Fuza is the Director of Apex Brazil, the Brazilian Trade and Investment Promotion Agency. Welcome to all of you, and I'm very glad you're all here. S.G. Koon Dwangjae, if I could ask you to start your statement, please.
Thank you very much, Laurel. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I'd like to thank UNCTAD for inviting me to join this seminar. Actually, the topic of this seminar is very much relevant to what we're trying to do in Thailand. Given the changing demographic structure of the country towards an aging society and technology disruptions, the competitive landscape has changed significantly. Automation and digitalization became the core of our industrial policies over the past few years. As for the state of the industries in Thailand, based on the survey conducted by our Federation of Thai Industries a few years ago, we're still quite a long way from Industry 4.0, unfortunately. Only 2% of the industries in Thailand have reached that level, and another 30% are at Industry 3.0. So we still have quite a significant percentage of companies that still need to do quite a bit of transformation. With a view to encouraging existing companies to move towards automation and digitalization, the government has taken several measures for several years now to help reduce investment costs related to automation and digitalization, such as some exemption of import duties on machinery and equipment, corporate income tax exemption or special tax deduction of STEM training costs, and STEM employee hiring. We're not simply interested in attracting Industry 4.0 investment, but we are trying to encourage existing ones to transform themselves to remain competitive. Recently, we have also enhanced our tax scheme to encourage companies to invest in Industry 4.0 technologies and those providing related services such as data centers, cloud computing, digital platforms, system integration, and additive manufacturing. We started to see the growth of local system integration after a couple of years of government's policies in encouraging automation. The government has also put in place digital infrastructure such as 5G infrastructure, and which can certainly facilitate industrial transformation such as IoT and data analytics. Another key factor, having the right manpower is very crucial in pushing forward significant industrial transformation and attracting Industry 4.0 investment. And this is not an easy thing to do, and it takes quite some time. But that's something that we need to do anyway. So some training grants have also been offered, and various ministries have joined efforts in reskilling and upskilling human resources to get ready for advanced manufacturing. So apart from upskilling our own people, we need to supplement the pool of skills by attracting foreign talent. A couple of years ago, we launched a program called Smart Visa in order to attract talents from overseas to supplement the pool of talents that we have in the country, and also to attract foreign startups, because with Industry 4.0 investment, a lot of opportunities would remain to be tapped into. And of course, they would form a part of the healthy ecosystem for Industry 4.0. And last but not least, policy adjustments need to be done pretty quickly. From our experience, we need to adjust our policies more often than before, because the situation has changed very rapidly. So we need to make sure that we keep up with the current situation. Thank you very much. I hope that I have kept my 3 minutes slot.
Very good. Thank you very much. Go along, Mr. Marcus Hess.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mrs. Ruma, dear colleagues on the panel, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. First, I want to thank you for inviting me to represent Germany today on this panel. It's a major event for us, and it's a great honor for me. I highly appreciate that. Stepping right into our subject, I, as a start, would like to take you back on our journey in Industry 4.0 history, because a little over 10 years ago, we started at Hannover Fair, Hannover Messe, with industry, which was now called Industry 4.0. It was first introduced to the world, and frankly, nobody really understood, apart from some insiders, what it was mainly about. And we tried to bring across that you should, if you use machines and you manufacture some goods, you should be able to tell yourself what's going to happen with the machine, what's going to happen to the product over the lifetime, is everything in the production cycle in order. And so the predictive manufacturing became an early use case. Everybody understood, because if you know about the faults and defaults of the production process, you're better off, at least cost-wise. So, but since then, this all evolved, and this concept has not only traveled the world, it changed industry, because to a certain extent, now the more or less holistic idea of producing and manufacturing gathered pace and space. So smart manufacturing is today a reality. Industry 4.0 goes far beyond increasing efficiency through automation. That is up to date, the new, well, let's say, bottom line. Today, we are looking for solutions to implement entirely new data-based business models for the industry. So starting with sensors, increasing productivity, better knowing about maintenance requirements, now turns into the idea of new business models based on Industry 4.0 technology. And so we have now new buzzwords like manufacturing as a service, autonomous driving, real-time capabilities, scalabilities, interoperability, data security. I could go on and forth with that, but this should only illustrate how this entire thing evolved over time. And additionally, or quite logically, the context of Industry 4.0 has changed as well. We have now complex value networks increasingly replacing the value chains we know. Perhaps in terms of an image, think of a starfish more than of a ladder with rungs. So it's all evolving into the ecosystem it's in, and it's not a kind of linear development. So our goal is now a comprehensive and flexible industrial ecosystem, including the suppliers, the manufacturers, the users, the framework conditions sites are working in, and policy makers come into the game as well to provide the necessary framework. And for this, common concepts and standards, but also new culture of cooperation is necessary, because it's not linear anymore. It is now more complex, and again, think more of a starfish. Together with our stakeholder and expert network, the platform Industry 4.0, we strive to develop the necessary technologies. The platform's expertise is the necessary input we need from the public side to tailor the public support and the possible public funding appropriately. Because without knowing where to put the money, it's quite difficult, because it's extremely important that needs and funding goes hand in hand. So for sure, we see Germany still as a pioneer in this field. Industry 4.0 is at our heart. We are quite fond and proud of it, to be honest. But our industry's companies are up to date, leading edge, that's sure. But for us, it's crystal clear that we cannot go this way alone. It doesn't work nationally, it doesn't work regionally, it only works globally. If you want to tap the potentials that are in there and have a rule-based shared economy worldwide, then you need to not only cooperate, but you have to look where is the supplier, where's the user, and to bring all these things together. So we have to leave the box of doing our work at home domestically quite well. But if you want to convince others, you have to go abroad. And openness and transparency, cooperation, collaboration are therefore the key for our success and for fostering investment in Industry 4.0. So
thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hess. Thank you. That is very important. You cannot go it alone. May we turn the floor over to Mr. Rodriguez-Rowe, please.
Sure. Hello. Thank you very much for the invitation. And it's a pride for Chile to be here and talking about this 4.2 investments. I want to be very brief. Invest Chile, which is the agency that promotes foreign direct investment into the country, has focused actively attracting investment projects in sectors that have promoted the development of Industry 4.0. At Invest Chile, the number of projects associated with the technology sector has grown for 57 in the year 2017 to over 170 this year. The amount to be invested for this project has increased from 1.6 billion to over 4 billion today. So that in turn, the potential number of jobs have grown from 2,000 to 8,600 jobs now. So it's an industry that is emerging, growing, and that at Invest Chile, we are proactively pushing. Projects in this sector represent half of Invest Chile's total portfolio, more than half of the potential jobs that will be generated by the portfolio, and 1 out of every $4 in Invest Chile's project portfolio comes from this sector. Finally, 32 projects in this sector supported by the team of Invest Chile have already been established in the country, representing close to 700 million and the creation of 1,100 jobs. That's projects that have already landed in the country and established here. And some successful cases that I want to share with you are, one is Microsoft Azure region, including the launch of 3 independent and interconnected data centers, which will accelerate the digital transformation of all industries. The investment associated with this, the Microsoft Azure region, is 1.9 billion for the next 5 years. So that's very good news for us. The other case is at Centi. The Brazilian multinational has 2 projects that correspond to investment of over 200 million in Chile. And Chile was the first place where the company developed a project outside of Brazil. And they are already analyzing the potential of a third data center. Evernote, which you all know, the iconic Silicon Valley technology company, installed its first and only software development center outside of the United States in our country, which makes us very proud, hiring more than 50 computer engineers, and their demand for staff continues to grow. And finally, Equifax. It has 3 software development centers in the world, one in Atlanta, one in Dublin, and the third in Santiago, with Chile being the largest of them in terms of the number of professionals. Today, they are in an expansion phase with the aim of having 300 computer engineers. With that, what I want to say and to show you is that our country is very worried and very, I would say, proactively working to build a Southern Cone hub in Chile for exporting services, digital services, to the rest of the region. And we are increasingly speeding up the projects of many other companies that want to come here and export services to the rest of the country. That's my vision.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And Mr. Hussein?
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity. I think in South Africa's case, we have embraced 4.0, firstly by establishing a Ministry of Communications and Digital Technology. Secondly, the President established a 4IR Presidential Council encompassing academia, scientists, engineering, business, labor, and civil society to develop and embrace the value proposition of South Africa as an innovation hub on the African continent. I think that was the first thing we did. Secondly, we put a policy framework in place in terms of data security, protection of Personal Information Act and cybersecurity, and the regulatory framework. Just then begin to open up the space. And as my colleague from Investment Chile has said, in my work as InvestSA, as the head of InvestSA, I think in the past few years, a significant amount of investment has come in infrastructure for data centers. For example, Amazon's major data centers, 3 new data centers in South Africa, new ones being built by Vantage, NTT, as well as Chiraku. So significant capability to build in the data infrastructure, as well as cloud infrastructure for IBM, Microsoft, and the like. So this is now positioned in South Africa to be a location where the 4IR work can really accelerate. I think for us, what has happened is also on a bilateral basis, we have also encouraged and partnered many countries for mutual cooperation in technology hubs. For example, with the French, with my colleague, the Germans, the UK governments, to encourage startups and the vision and the spirit of innovation. So this is also encouraging. What we've seen for us in South Africa is that it has been a nascent sector, but it has rapidly accelerated. And I think COVID brought this to the fore. And because of COVID, South Africa was in a very, very strict lockdown. So mainly supply chains were disrupted, long supply chains were disrupted, and you had to make supply chains shorter. And how did you then enable manufacturing companies in what you would call industrialized Internet of Things? How do you make that thing shorter? So if I take an example, at the beginning of our lockdown in level 5 of our restriction, South Africa did not have any capacity for ventilators. So together with the global partners, such as the University of Cambridge, the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, and private sector companies such as engineering and automotive, we were able then to use IoT specifically in design and connect with the UK and the CSIR, as well as companies to retool and tweak production capacity, so that we now, in the space of 6 months, we're able to produce 20,000 ventilators locally. So that just tells you the scope and the breadth. So important to that, the government also has embedded STEM in schools and in university, so that we have the critical skills. We've also gone out to look at a critical skills visa to attract such talent to South Africa. But I think also in South Africa's case, we've got a very diversified industrial base. And if you're looking at the new company's new round of investments, for example, the C-Class Mercedes-Benz is one of few platforms globally, and it's just launched in June, and that is a totally robotic plant. Equally so, next week will be a hybrid plant from Toyota, which is robotic and very ergonomic. So we have, in short, in terms of my 3 minutes, South Africa is evolving innovative destination for 4IR and so forth. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Our last speaker today, Mr. Fusa, please.
Hello, hello to everyone. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. Such an important subject for all of us to discuss. We are at Apex Brazil as the trade and investment promoting agency in Brazil. We don't have a specifically program for the 4.0 agenda, but we are already inserted in a national plan from the federal government, which has already a very specific working group on the subject since 2017. And now we have the Brazilian agenda moving forward as well. So when we do one of our main activities, such as direct assistance to investors, and we attract FDI through venture capital and private equity, when we support corporate venture, and we foster partnerships between our startups and technology and industrial companies with the 4.0 technology-related companies abroad, we are already inserted in this transversal way with the national agenda for the subject. So for us, we have this in mind in all of the process of investment attraction to the future, because right now we're going through a very important market opening of Brazil. So we are literally executing a wide opening to the private sector in regard to energy, logistics, and the 5G technologies is just around the corner. So we have this working group already identified that the 4.0 industry will have an impact, a positive impact in reduction of costs and increase of productivity. There is probably going to exceed just at the first site that we have been executing over 70 billion reais, which is over $10 billion yearly to these companies. So we are very much interested in fostering the environment, in exchange technology and knowledge with partner countries and entrepreneurs in order to advance with the 4.0 agenda and increase productivity worldwide, not only for our people, but to help support humanity as a whole. So it's thank you very much for the chance to be here, and I'm really looking forward for the development of the discussion today.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you all very much for these excellent statements. I think we've seen a number of common themes. the themes of collaboration. Also, the idea that policy is very important, for example, the visas, implementation of visa programs, as well as working groups across the governments, realizing that having a technical focus is actually quite important to spur this sort of economic and global attraction. So I'd like to start actually with a couple of questions. The way we're going to do it, because we have so many wonderful people today on our panel, is to start with a question for SG Kun Duangjai first, and then Mr. Hess, I'd like you to follow on. So she'll be answering and you'll be thinking about your answer. And it starts with really what is being done, SG Kun Duangjai, in Thailand, involving the multinational enterprises and other technology investors to help develop that Industry 4.0 ecosystem.
Yeah. Well, we actually, the Thailand has been a location for many multinational corporations. For example, we are one of the world's largest producer of hard disk drives. So the electronics industry became one of the most important industries in Thailand. And given the fact that we have quite a number of multinational companies in the country, just recently, earlier this year, Western Digital factory in Prajinburi in Thailand has been awarded or has been selected to join the Global Lighthouse Network by the World Economic Forum, which indicates their excellence in the fourth industrial revolution technologies. So that has been the showcase that it is possible to do it in Thailand. Actually, after the company has been awarded this network participation, several agencies started to have some kind of collaboration with the company, or come up with some work plan, because not only it is a showcase, but it could be an excellent learning center for other companies, and also for training young students because this could be a good inspiration for other companies, and also for Thai people, that we can do it, because over 80% of people who were involved in the implementation of the program are local. So this is one example that we should try to involve multinational enterprises that are there in Thailand. And also what we try to do is that we try to foster startups, because with Industry 4.0, we can create a lot of opportunities for startups, for innovation-driven enterprises, and so on. So this could be a good opportunity. So this is what we plan to do in the near future. I have to say that in the past, we didn't do much with multinational enterprises. They came with their technologies and like sitting on their own islands and so on, Thai companies. But we see, as Marcus mentioned earlier, about global collaboration. I think intra-company collaboration would be key for industrial transformation, particularly companies in the supply chain.
No,
you cannot drive. Yeah, you cannot drive Industry 4.0 without collaboration, because you need everyone on board.
Wonderful. And I do like that example that Mr. Hess talked about the starfish and how we're all integrated, and the idea of companies working with each other, and then companies being integrated to the local citizenry to give that path to innovation and education is so important. Mr. Hess.
Yeah, thank you very much. What the German experience perhaps is, we have a close cooperation with industry, goes without saying. We have invented is the wrong word, but we have established seminars on the Hannover Messe, yearly seminars with industry together to address in particular SMEs, to address companies interested in technological aspects of Industry 4.0, of the applications, the use cases. And we've set up a secretariat that is a kind of hook point for everybody, one-stop shop for information, bringing workshop experience, producing papers and introducing Industry 4.0 to those companies who haven't heard of it, but are trying to survive the transformation process that's taking place due to digitalization and stuff like that. And we have introduced, well, an internet-based map of best practices, where we have the companies already applying Industry 4.0 technologies, and where others who might be from the same sector or the same business flavor, but haven't introduced so far Industry 4.0 in their company, can see how it might work and how it could work as a kind of blueprint for those companies. And that works out pretty well. We have now similar maps in cooperation with Italy and France, but in essence, it's more for the domestic industrial landscape to see and to get a glimpse of what is possible, and without inventing everything from scratch anew, but building on the efforts and examples others have made. And that is something that plays out quite well, even in the 11th year of the middle-aged child Industry 4.0.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you very much. For Mr. Rodriguez and Mr. Fusen, I would like you to both answer this question in turn. What policies have you found have worked particularly well in each of your respective countries? And what do you think perhaps is missing? Obviously, we have people taking different approaches, developing secretariats, etc. How do you feel each one of your countries is responding to this? Mr. Rodriguez.
Yes, hello, thank you. I believe that more than policies, the state and the government has been organizing and has been developing and pushing some ministries and organizations to worry and to take care of this new coming industry. In this particular government, the science and innovation technology ministry was created, and the main mission is to push for innovation and to develop to improve the climate to attract investment and to to facilitate the coming of players. Second, I would say that the pandemic made all the players to be more proactive in terms of attracting investment and focusing on developing sectors and hubs, particularly in technology. Chile has been very aggressive in bringing and convincing the important actors to install themselves in the country and to analyze and prospect the country. And on top of that, to facilitate that the game, we have worked in many other, I would say, complementary things in terms of developing digital talent. Today we have there are public-private initiatives to develop digital talent because of the demand has been higher than the supply of digital talent. We have been very proactive on that. Somebody said something about visas, VisaTech. We developed a program about VisaTech, which is aimed at people who work at companies involved with innovation, R&D, and 4.0 industry as a whole. Another thing, just to summarize, we, the state, the government, have worked with engineering schools to pass from a 6-year engineering program to a 5-year engineering program in order to first to have more supply of engineers, and then and also to focus the education on more I would say, innovation hands-on, and what the digital hub needs to keep on developing. I would say that are some examples.
Excellent. Another look to the future and how the citizens can be brought into this entire process early on.
Yeah.
Mr. Hussain, please.
Thanks. I think firstly, we have a national development plan, and within that is an infrastructure plan that we have for South Africa 2035. I think what's key for us, if I look at the infrastructure space and in bringing in this kind of major data centers and cloud centers, what has been key for us, it served a number of purpose, and having the government to be more agile and being able to respond to the opportunity, is that in South Africa's case, while we have been able to scale up data centers, for example, when you bring a data center of this size and magnitude, what you need is also, you need power, energy. And South Africa is very constrained by energy to serve those data. So what we did is we then enable companies through other policy imperatives to plug in renewable energy. So then it also served us the purpose of sustainability. So we were able to build in not only a plain data center, but a green data center. So the issue of having infrastructure and then sustainable development also became important. So what I'm trying to say is that what are the value chains that or sectors that you want to attract, and how do you then within your industrial policy are able to see where you could have economic development, investment, and then broader expansion of industries across many verticals and build ecosystems. So in this case, we were able to build ecosystem for data centers which are sustainable. So these are some of the things that we've done. So in South Africa's case also, you know, we are a mining resource nation. So what we championed is from the old mining private sector that we got together. A number of leading private sector companies have now developed in very remote locations digital mines. A total digital mine. So that is how we've been able to embrace and leapfrog and utilize technology to the best of advantage. And then also comes the issue, I think, in our case, as well as on the African continent, is the issue of infrastructure, broadband for rural development and telecommunications. And if you look at, in South Africa, we're already rolling out 5G technology. And if you look at how the space is opening up, we had, for example, in the IoT SIM card connections, it was basically about, in South Africa's case, it was about 8.8 million in 2015. In 2019, it's over 25.5 million. So it's a compounded average growth rate of over 30%. So it shows you that the different sectors are really leapfrogging. So in the telecom sector, leading to that is the banking sector. Very sophisticated banking sector for mobile application, digital mobile, that moves across the breadth from South Africa's 60 billion people onto the African continent. So I think for us in government is to provide that policy space for entrepreneurship, for investment, for startups to flourish. And that, I think, is the key ingredients for a successful policy and investment, attractive environment to attract these kind of investments. Thank you.
Excellent. Excellent there. And Mr. Fusa, what challenges, it sounds like technology investment in Brazil in general has been coming along, and maybe not so much with Industry 4.0. So what else are you seeing trying to attract general investment in Brazil? What are some of those challenges? And also what's some opportunities that you're seeing particularly?
Right, yes. we have several challenges, but the current government, it's been very serious about the digitalization of the country services and the culture of digitalization. So we have a very large, for example, startup ecosystem with over 13,000 startups mapped, but those directly related to the 4.0 industry are less than 1,000 still. But in order to increase and enhance the interest of entrepreneurs in this sector, we recently have approved a startup legal framework. It's an entire new legislation, which is a very good cooperation between the government and Congress in order to create this legal framework where we have the juridical figure of the sandbox. So all these new ideas can flourish with the proper legal safety to test their technologies in advance. So this has been very taken very seriously with the government. We also reached recently a very interesting number of the #1 country in the world with over 100 million people in digitalization of government services. In the world ranking, we're 7th right now, but we're #1 with over 100 million people. So this is very interesting because we have seen that the technology sector and the interest for the increase of productivity and new solutions, it's something that is very positive for the Brazilian entrepreneur and for all those who come here and check our ecosystem and our business environment, which is really getting better in a very, very fast speed. We have been changing, we have been doing some strategical measures along the last 3 years, and we already have a new Brazil. It's already a new reality, but it's good that we expect the market to give the proper price to pressify that. It hasn't been pressified by the market yet, this new changes. And all these companies related to technology, to the 4.0 industry, they're definitely going to be in the front row of this new great solutions that are going to flourish here, because we have the scale and we are also having this incredibly enhanced with infrastructure, with communications infrastructure, pushed especially by private investments, because we are opening the market. So this is all very, very positive. And we are also doing another more and more legislation measures to increase the facilitation to do business here. For example, now we have this new law in regard to special economic zones. They are not only going to approach export production, they're also going to approach export of services. So you wonder how the impact that this is going to have in digital services. They're going to be able to be provided in special economic zones with more competitive elements in regard to taxation and so on. So these are several challenges, but we're advancing step by step with sustainable solutions, which has been very interesting for us in regard to the energy source. You know, our energy matrix, it's the majority of our energy matrix is already renewable. So the development of new technologies here, by definition, are going to be powered by renewable energy mostly. So this is some of the steps we've been doing. But the major challenge here is to spread the word about what is the concept or the industry 4.0 and all the positive elements that brings together with it. So the entrepreneurs understand that there is a special value in going down this road. There's not only some extra increase of cost in your budget to develop something that some think they don't need right now, but we understand this is going to be a must in the competitiveness of our economy in a very short future.
Excellent, thank you. We have a question from the audience, and if you would each take about 2 minutes to answer in turn. In your country, what type of companies or industries were the earliest adopter of Industry 4.0, or are you seeing, much like Mr. Fusa said, we're seeing lots of technologies feed into the idea of Industry 4.0, including 5G, et cetera. So Mr. Hussein, we'll start with you, please. Which industries or companies are you seeing most adopt the Industry 4.0 ideas?
Basically, I think from our perspective, it's the telcos, the major telcos, pretty advanced. And then the financial services sector, which we term the fintech sector, the banking sector. And I think what has exploded in the past 2 years, particularly because of COVID, the e-commerce and retail sector, particularly in what you would call cashless and contactless customer experience at retail. So those have exploded. And then in logistics supply chain, in the past 2 years because of things being constrained. So the agility for mainly startups in this particular sector. So I think those are about the main, the bigger sectors that are moving fast. And then I think in South Africa's case, the global business service sector, a sector that we kept open throughout the lockdown, has served us well. We've now pioneered and do a lot of work in what you're calling from the work from home concept, in very complex global business services. That sector is a very fast growing sector in South Africa. It's actually recognized as the #1 leading sector globally as a GBS location. South Africa is #1 in the world at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Haas, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, who started first? I think it were the large companies from the manufacturing sector, because they wanted to explore possibilities to improve the predictive maintenance aspect. But that over time evolved dramatically. And today we have almost all sizes of companies involved. The large ones, the big SMEs as close follow-up, and now the small ones as well, mainly from the manufacturing sector, of course, but now it is the service that is related to the product that comes more and more into play. And totally detached from that is the data-driven business model that comes with, well, let's say, developing new business models out of the data created by the production process, by the machines or the logistics involved or whatever, and has nothing to do with the Industry 4.0 companies from the very first start time. So now we have a broad range of companies from almost all sectors that are applying those technologies. And I think that's pretty much showing how this all evolved. And yeah, I think the future lies more and more in the data-based services. That would be my personal gut feeling. Yeah, thank you.
Excellent. And SG Kundwangjai, what did you see first for investments in Thailand? Oh, we'll come back to you. How about you, Mr. Rodriguez?
You mean companies more intensive in the use of 4.0 technology, right?
Yes, yeah, like the beginnings, and what did you originally see those types of companies investing in?
I don't know. I mean, there are different sectors that are adopting this. I would say one of the latest in adopting 4.0 to become more efficient and more, I would say, productive is the food sector. Increasingly, but not many years ago. If I go to the other side, I would say that the banking sector, because of the management of information, they are very demanding of data center storage, and they are innovating all the time in order to increase the offering to clients. Of course, the financial sector and specifically the banking sector is an early adopter, and one that has to keep on innovating and going. And some of the traditional sectors that have been going into, I would say, Chile is a mostly a mining company in terms of resources. And within mining, they have been, I don't know if the word is adopting, but getting into these new technologies and the use of new resources in order to, I would say, not only to be more efficient in terms of what they do, but also to uh, ad- administer or the resources and the areas that are not solely productive, but that made the company ongoing. What I try to say that the many different sectors are in different levels of getting into these new technologies. But all has been driven by the, as I told before, the installation of this sort of like a digital hub on the rest of the region that is increasingly speeding the rhythm of adoption of this.
Thank you. Khun Duanjai, in Thailand, who were some of the early adopters of Industry 4.0? What kind of companies were you seeing early on?
Yeah, definitely large companies and the industries, the sectors that we see active use of automation for many, many years, and now Industry 4.0, I think would be electronics industry and the automotive industry. It happens that these two industries are major industries in Thailand because we are a major automotive production hub. But and also petrochemicals, because that is another key industry in Thailand. Interestingly enough, we see a strong tendency to go forward. Well, not for Industry 4.0 yet, but I think active actions as regards the use of automation, that is in the food industry, because we also have a very large food industry, about 10,000 companies in Thailand. Even just the other day, we approved incentives for one project for using automation. It's a chicken farm. A chicken farm that want to use automation systems and to use a SCADA and to make sure that they get everything right on track. So not only large companies, I think even SMEs or mid-sized companies in all kinds of sectors, people started to see. I think in Thailand, the trend is even stronger because we're experiencing an aging society. So people need to go for automation, and in the end, they would go for data-driven activities. And also because we focus very much on SDG, eco-efficiency would be a keyword in the future.
Wonderful, thank you. And Mr. Fuso, you have the last words for the session. Thinking about early investments in technology in Brazil.
Yeah, definitely the pioneers in this full digitalization and already moving for the 4.0 industry back in the day was the banking sector was very advanced. The banking environment today in Brazil is extremely advanced and digitalized. But then we have already our industrial park also adopted pretty much most of high technology automation processes later on. But today we're seeing a very, very impressive advance in the agribusiness, in the agriculture sector, agri-techs. Since agriculture, the agribusiness is one of our economic powerhouses here in Brazil. It's a very expressive sector, and it turns over a lot of sales. It's a pretty strong economic flux. So this has the proper muscle to develop many solutions, and they're really going very fast. We're looking now some incredible solutions to trace the entire process in many food and beverage, agriculture industry. So this is advancing in a very positive way. We're checking now the possibility for you to track everything that from the food industry, so worldwide. So the solutions to automate, not only to increase production, but to increase safety sanitary safety and all the process is going very strong. So this is something really to look for in the short future. The agri-tech environment in Brazil has a long way to go, a very nice road ahead with many opportunities.
Thank you. Thank you all very much for our panelists joining us today. Thank you for the wonderful questions from the audience as well. Greatly appreciate this wonderful discussion. Thank you. And we're actually going to start our second part of the session. If our panelists for the second session would like to join here, we can start with some introductions shortly. Wonderful. Okay. Wonderful. Thank you all very much for joining us today. It's been a fantastic session already on Industry 4.0. Wonderful group of policy leaders, and now we're going to talk much more about the technology implications of Industry 4.0 as various companies and countries start to adopt and attract and invest in these very specific ideas and technologies. My name is Laurel Ruma. I am the editorial director for MIT Technology Review Insights Division, and the MIT Technology Review is published by the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and has been since 1899, making us the oldest technology magazine. I welcome you all today, and we're going to start by introducing our panelists, and then we will go on and allow your brief statements, and then we'll have some questions to follow up for discussion. So to start, Mr. Thomas Hahn is the Chief Expert of Software at Siemens Digital, and he's also a member of the steering committee for the platform Industry 4.0. Dr. Nathan Linder is the co-founder and CEO of Tulip, as well as the co-founder and chairman of Form Labs. Mr. Stephen McKinley is the co-founder of Ambi Robotics and the co-creator of Berkeley Open Arms. Mr. Sandeep Badra is a partner at Vertex Ventures. Dr. Suzanne Beeler is the Secretary General in the International Federation of Robotics. Mr. Patrick Van Den Bosch is the partner and Global Advanced Analytics Practice Head at A.T. Kearney. And Mr. Stephen Meller is the Chief Technical Officer at Industry IoT Consortium. And you can find out more about our wonderful panelists on the event website. To start, Mr. Thomas Hahn, your statement, please.
Yeah, many thanks. And dear all, the excellences, the colleagues here on the panel, pleasure for me to speak about perspective company, Siemens, like I said before, but also I'm since the beginning also a member of the platform Industry 4.0 with an international network. When you speak, I just start a little bit regarding Siemens, what is driving us regarding Industry 4.0. You know, we are headquartered in Germany, but have worldwide business. So investment in worldwide, in let's say centers, excellence centers, application centers, or factories, plants is obvious for us. It's really what we want to do, what we are doing, and what we will do also in the future. And the second part is what has challenged us in Industry 4.0. I think I had also the pleasure to participate. The previous topic was, let's say, changing value chains, the possibility to make it more efficient, more sustainable, to look what is, for example, a circular economy, what is needed, what are new technical capabilities. Robotics, colleague from the robotics is here inside, for example, artificial intelligence, communication like 5G. So this is, let's say, driving us because we want to make for our customers where we are selling our products and solutions more efficient, better. But we are looking also, Markus has mentioned also the data-driven business, what are new business opportunities. So what we are doing is, I'm not covering the domain where we are inside as Siemens, from the discrete manufacturing process industry. Besides, there was also the person from Asia mentioned also animal farms, for example, where we're also selling our systems. We have around the world around 100 factories, or more than 100, several hundred, sorry, some factories, and also we are exporting this. I'll give you one example. In the electronic factory in Amberg, well known worldwide, also recognized from the WIF to be registered in the Global Lighthouse Network in April this time, which of course we are proud of. But what we are doing in this factory is of course Industry 4.0, AI, robotics, data, to improve existing business, increase quality, and so on. You know, all the topics, what are the technology differences. That's also one side where we're using internally and externally. For sure, we are providing around the world our products and solutions for, let's say, other manufacturers, producers, like mentioned before, up to also use it in farms or something else. And here I give you one example where Industry 4.0 can improve really topics. One of our last significant example was regarding vaccine production at BioNTech, where we were able to help the customers, BioNTech, to ramp up a new factory in 5 months. You cannot do this when you don't have the simulation, the digital twin, where you simulate the product, the production upfront. Also all mechanisms from Industry 4.0. This is a company view, and for sure, and that's the last topic I want to touch into, nobody can do this alone. Nobody can do this as a company alone. I mentioned before 5G, which are now going also on the shop floor. To be honest, at least it's not our major home turf. It's more for the telecommunication companies. Digitalization, you have the IT companies, you know, the data centers, the cloud applications. You have to look what is the impact, what you are doing. So you have to speak with trade unions. You have to look what is the newest trends in technology with academia and meaning, like what Marcus has mentioned also, we set up, let's say, a network, because nobody can do this alone. In the platform Industry 4.0, the different stakeholders, like mentioned, companies, academia, government, trade union are working together and looking what are the trends and how to implement this worldwide. So, and this is my second role, where I'm more than happy to speak later a little bit about this, how we are doing this. Many thanks.
Wonderful, thank you. Dr. Linder.
Thank you so much, Laurel. It's really great to be here, and appreciate the invitation and the chance to share a little bit about Tulip and our view at what's happening in advanced manufacturing and Industry 4.0. So I think Tulip, like quite a few other companies, has experienced tremendous growth, because I think we're at a point where it's very clear that we are accelerating the adoption of modern cloud-based technologies. I mentioned AI, machine learning here, to basically streamline operation. And this shift is, I think, is amplified by COVID-19. And hopefully, you know, it's not something we should totally focus on, but it's definitely interesting, you know, with the backdrop of what's happening in the supply chain. I want to explain, you know, a little bit like what we've been seeing that's leading to this growth and this adoption. Basically, you know, we have a situation where on one hand you have a huge shortage worldwide of skilled people who can actually use technologies, you know, like clouds and platform as a service to help the organization transform. And the reason they need to do that, because we are continuously building new factories, taking new technologies, creating new products, and ever increasing, you know, faster product cycles. And to do that, really the only solution is to get technology at the hands of people who are actually doing the work. And to get that done, you need different architectures that can help this kind of dynamic environment. And this is, of course, always a combination of machine devices, sensors, in the backend that supports it, namely, you know, whether it's your inventory system or your ERP. We more or less take it for granted that in IT environment, everything is being connected and kind of attached to each other and can dynamically change as the business changes. But when it comes to the OT side of the house or the shop floor, where people are basically in charge of running the day-to-day operations, they're kind of in the Stone Age. They're using pen and paper, Excel's, bespoke software, and that simply doesn't cut it anymore. It doesn't scale. And so, the challenge and where we see our opportunity, excuse me, is to help effectively democratize this reality and push this concept that have been called citizen development, and helping bring this technology down to the shop floor using no-code technologies. However, if you're just trying to apply no-code technologies without understanding the real needs of people in operations, basically you're going to fail, because the people on shop floor are not IT people. There could be industrial operations people, or control engineers, or safety, or lean, and they're very much engineers, but they're not necessarily software engineers. And as you know, we're in this era where we have our friends VCs here, and like this term that software eats the world, or software drives the world. And software-driven operations, software-driven manufacturing is reality. And to do that, we have to adopt this type of approach where you let people who actually do the work have the best tool available. And I completely agree. This is not this is an ecosystem and requires thinking through an ecosystem, because on the one hand you have great manufacturing technologies and PLCs and robotics and what have you on the physical layer, and all the way to the top you have industrial cloud, and we are partnered with the usual suspects like the Microsoft and AWS of the world. And we all need to work together to enable the customers to achieve what the organization can achieve once they adopt this technology. So, and the last point I'll make is that this is not like a nice to have. This is imperative. Organizations that don't do that, what will happen to them effectively is that they will become less competitive. And the traditional way of building manufacturing system, and I've been hearing customers saying it, we are not focused on our next MES project or MOM project, or however you want to call it. We are focused on building a digital operations system, which is a larger, more encompassing term that I keep hearing again and again. And it's just a different stack that we're all need to be very focused on building it together for the benefit of our customers.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Mr. McKinley.
Thanks, Laurel, and thanks, Thomas and Nathan. It's great to be here. Appreciate the opportunity to talk about our collective experiences here with Industry 4.0. I really want to bounce off of what Nathan was talking about with respect to democratization, and I believe that we, as panelists here, have the distinct privilege of seeing all of this change that is being brought by Industry 4.0 as a distinct opportunity. We're entrepreneurs and scientists, and we are driving that change. However, I, as a co-founder of Ambi Robotics and as developer of robots for the past decade, have been deeply involved with my own hands in installing these robots next to workers in warehouses and in plants around the world. And I think we have a distinct responsibility to view this change from their eyes, as well as something that can be quite nerve-wracking and anxiety-inducing, because sometimes change leaves people behind. And we have a distinct responsibility to view from their eyes how this change could upend their lives and deal with some of that anxiety head on, because Industry 4.0, this robotics, all of this automation is not necessarily a force for good all the time. Sometimes it can lead to intense monopolization behind people who drive this automation with capital. So we have a responsibility as entrepreneurs to focus on the people who are actually using the technology and try to focus on uplifting their lives and trying to improve their working opportunities and to give them something that they can learn from and tools that they can use to make their lives actually easier. And as investors, you have the responsibility to invest in entrepreneurs who focus on that humanity behind technology and focus on the people who actually use it. So I'd love to contribute to this discussion from that point of view, as somebody who has been there on the floor, bolting robots to the ground and training people who previously thought that their jobs would be lost, and explaining to them how this actually might represent more job opportunities within their rural environments, and how this actually is a change for good for them also.
Thank you very much. Mr. Badra, please.
Thank you, everybody, for the opportunity to speak in the panel. Thank you to the UNCTAD for setting up this conversation on investments in Industry 4.0, and thank you to the rest of the panelists. I'm Sandeep. I'm one of the managing directors at Vertex Ventures US. Vertex is a family of 5 funds across the world, each of which is an independent investing entity with its own focus and theme. Vertex Ventures US invests in business-to-business software and services companies, and we typically partner with founders at the earliest stages of their company formation and journey, at the seed or Series A, if you want to be technical. And we are thrilled to be high conviction and sort of concentrated investors working with a few founders at a time. And I'm kind of excited that 2 founders that we've had the fortune of working with, Natan and Stephen, are here on this panel with me here today. Industry 4.0, we are thematic investors, and Industry 4.0 represents a significant investment theme for us as a firm. We raise sort of $150 to $200 million funds every 2 to 3 years. Anybody here is welcome to chat with us about that. But our goal is to look at sort of broad demographic and secular change that's happening within a variety of industries, led by software and led by the adoption of cloud and sort of data, and invest behind it in a way that creates significant sort of opportunities for jobs and economic development. And that's the role that we think venture capital does play and should play, especially at the earliest stages of company formation and partnering with founders. If you, for sort of my perspective as an early stage investor here, let me sort of set the frame for why we are excited about this and why we will continue to invest in startups in this market for the next 5-10 years. We have been investing in this market for the past 3 or 4 years. If you look at sort of the capital investment that is going on, this is not venture dollars, but we're talking about actual investment in goods and services for Industry 4.0. I think between 2016 and 2020, for the top 6 Industry 4.0 categories, which are electronics, manufacturing, transport, construction, and automotive, over $600 billion is getting deployed. This is across automation, hardware, software, and services. And I mean, that's a massive amount of capital investment that's happening across the world. And in tandem with that, the amount of venture dollars that are going into Industry 4.0 has also increased from about $0.7 billion in 2017 to about, even in the midst of the pandemic in 2020, it was $1.4 billion. And this year in 2021, we've already exceeded $2 billion. So that's like, some sort of perspective and sort of not just the amount of actual deployment of technology and digitization that's happening, as Thomas talked about, within Industry 4.0, but then on the back of that, right, seeing this trend, the venture dollars that are backing founders such as Stephen and Natan and others, making massive sort of generational changes in this industry, and we are super excited about. And it's driven by 2 things, right? Like, the sort of the venture capitalist perspective is that if you want to invest in secular trends, we should study demand and supply patterns which are secular in themselves, right? So let's talk about demand first, right? Demographics is destiny. I think Natan talked about sort of the changing workforce, right? And we are seeing that there's record levels of manufacturing activity, post-pandemic, and actually, quite frankly, right before the pandemic, not seen over the course of the last 2 decades in this world. Okay, 2, Natan talked about the impending talent shortage in manufacturing labor. I think the projections is that there's going to be about 2 million sort of manufacturing shortfall of manufacturing jobs in North America alone, which is significant if you really think about it, right? And part of it is driven by the sort of changing of the guard, where manufacturing shop floor workers and management, used to be from the previous generations who were perhaps less familiar with digital. They were not so digital natives. Whereas, we are seeing sort of people who are born in 1980 onwards, which is sort of, millennials and Gen Zs, taken over not just the shop floor roles, but also actually the roles of management, right? And it's kind of interesting in this panel because, of our two founders, one is a millennial, or, perhaps a slightly older millennial, that is Nathan, and one is a much younger sort of founder. This is Stephen. And, I think both of them see the same perspective, which is the changing of the guard and the changing of sort of the type of person that it both works at the shop floor as well as actually makes the managerial decisions and investments.
Thank you.
And then,
Mr. Sid,
yeah,
Mr. Badra, we'll have
and that's why we are excited about investing in this category.
Excellent. We'll have more time for that later. Dr. Beeler, please.
First of all, thank you for having me on the panel. It's a great pleasure to be here. We've already heard a lot of opportunities robotics is offering. We are, especially in the pandemic, saw the flexibility for robotics. So companies quickly rescheduled their production line to produce ventilators or personal protective equipment. So that's the flexibility robotics is offering. We're seeing the resilience, and we've already talked about the vulnerability of supply chains. So by using robots, we can overcome some of this difficulties. We see a huge potential to increase the energy and resource efficiency of production. So that's the next big topic, to look at the sustainability of manufacturing. We also see a huge benefit in increasing productivity and also competitiveness of companies. And we're not talking about only the large size companies like the automotive and electronic manufacturer. We're talking also about the SMEs that can stay competitive when they are adopting robots and can actually even succeed in a globalized world. So we have to look at that. Robots should take over the dull, dirty, dangerous, and delicate work, making the workplace of the future more appealing, more beneficial for the worker, actually. So that's a huge potential, but of course have to reap that. There's a lot of work to be done still. And so if we do it properly, robotics is safeguarding jobs. It's not killing the jobs. It's increasing overall societal well-being. We have better jobs, better paid jobs. So societies rise when using robots. If you're looking at the figures, IFR is compiling global statistics called World Robotics. We're about to publish that next week. And we saw that in 2020, 3 million industrial robots were operating in factories around the world. That's an increase of 10% over the last year. And we see that even with pandemic and related lockdowns, economic downturn, that the number of new installations in the last year was not shrinking, but actually slightly grew. But we also have to confess the growth and the use of robots is not equally distributed over the globe. So we are looking at the top 5 countries, that's China, Japan, US, Korea, and Germany. They are taking 3/4 of the share of robots newly installed. And looking at China, they have a clear policy on promoting the use of robots. They are heavily investing. They are supporting the industry. They are taking the lead for years now, and each year they are expanding that lead. We have to see that. So as it's always difficult to compare the robot use across countries, so we're using as IFR the robot density. And the robot density is the number of industrial robots used per 10,000 workers in manufacturing employees. So the global average currently is at 126. This value is growing on average every year by 10 to 15% over the past decade. But the spread is enormous. So we're looking at Korea with 932, and Russia is at 6 only. So the spread's enormous. We've seen the efforts of China. I mean, they are willing to invest in robots, and they managed to increase their robots density tremendously. They are now at 246. They've only passed the global average in 2017. So that's what they are rising much above average. That's what incentivizing government programs can, of course, result in. So I'm happy to discuss any necessary measures we would recommend to improve that for other countries as well. We should make sure that no one's left behind, of course.
Thank you, Dr. Beeler. Mr. Van den Busch, please.
Thanks, Laurel. Hi, everyone. Delighted to be invited to this panel. My name is Patrick Van den Bosch. I'm a partner at Carney. Carney is a global management consulting company. We serve, among others, more than 3/4 of the Fortune Global 500 from offices in 40 countries. I've been here going on 25 years, 22 of those based in the US. And I've had the chance to help a variety of clients across industries with global supply chain and manufacturing operations challenges. So in addition to interacting with these clients on a daily basis, as an organization, we also keep our finger on the pulse by things like our Carney Factory of the Year, which is an annual benchmark competition that has been conducted across various geographies around the world since 1992, and a State of the Industry report that tracks and addresses developments that are most relevant to our manufacturing clients. So based on that, we've seen a few things. We've seen, first of all, the adoption of Industry 4.0 technologies unevenly, but nonetheless increasing across companies and industries, especially in automation and robotics, and also analytics-based solutions. But despite that, we still see less than half of manufacturing companies in the US that have robots in place. Most of them are in material handling and movement, so low value added activities from a lean perspective. But now what we're seeing is US manufacturers have been lagging in investment over the last decades, I should say. And there's now a bit of a technology upgrade wave going on, coming out of COVID. Companies are now geographically diversifying, and as part of that, they're bringing some of their manufacturing back to the US. And so for the foreseeable future, we actually see a lot of these Industry 4.0 investments primarily focused or geared towards improving labor efficiency. Skilled labor is hard to come by. We already mentioned that here in this panel. And it's still expensive in the US compared to the countries where the goods were made before. Now, one of the biggest inhibitors of Industry 4.0 implementation that we hear about from our clients is that there's still a perceived low ROI. Recent technology pricing definitely has created much more attractive business cases, and we see economies of scale increasing as adoption increases. So we expect prices to reduce further for all these Industry 4.0 technologies. The leading companies, the ones that basically score highest in our Factory of the Year competition, they report on average about 6% realized reduction in total unit costs since they implemented technologies. That's total unit costs, including raw material and everything, so not just labor. And that's quite substantial. And they expect actually to further reduce these unit costs with additional I 4.0 investments by another 15% in the next 3 years. So the ROI can definitely be there. And it'll need to be there because part of this geographical diversification means less scale, more redundancy, higher cost. So that's going to have to be offset. And I think I 4.0 will definitely be a critical element in that. Now, another thing is that the crucial ingredient that these leaders list in terms of successfully implementing I 4.0, as Nathan mentioned, is actually giving workers the technical as well as the change management skills they need. So the technical skills were addressed, but the change management skills are also important because think about it, right now, a lot of manufacturing operations, including those in the US, are still run to a fair extent by gut. And changing over from gut to analytics-based solutions to devices that tell you what to do, that's a mindset change. And that's not easy to happen, especially not with an older workforce. But if you get these people on board, they can lead and support the change, and you can finally get past this thing that a lot of companies get stuck into, which we've lovingly called the pilot purgatory, where you do small pilots, they're scattered across the organization, but there's very little to impact to show for it, and you can't really look at or create anything end to end. So I think despite the fact that the discussion here is about Industry 4.0 investments primarily in technology, I think let's not also forget to invest in workers that will use those.
Very important. Thank you very much. Mr. Miller, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to be here, and thank you, Sandeep, for reminding me that I'm old. But to business. I'm the Chief Technical Officer for the IIC, which was founded as the Industrial Internet Consortium in 2014. Our goal then was to accelerate the adoption of the industrial internet. That term, I think these days has been deprecated. People use the term Industry 4.0 to mean both the entity in Germany and all of these technologies. People also use the term cyber-physical systems, or CPS. To my mind, these are very much the same. You can argue, of course, about the exact differences. In fact, there's currently a email panel going on with IEEE trying to differentiate between CPS and IoT. Total waste of time in my estimation, but never mind, there you go. Anyway, our goal was to get moving on making the industrial internet be a real thing. And we began with what we call test beds. These are scaled down real world implementations, pilots, if you like. And one of the things that we learned very quickly that Patrick mentioned is, of course, that if you just have a bunch of these separated, you don't get very far. And you have to be working very, very closely with the individuals. And that was also mentioned before. You have to be working with the OT people to ensure that they understand that you're not trying to take their jobs. That's absolutely key. Our first flagship publication was the Industrial Internet Reference Architecture, which was announced, as it happens, in Berlin in June 2016, I think it was. We have since made a mapping to RAMI 4.0, which is the Industry 4.0 reference architecture. As an entity, we are very concerned about interconnectedness and liaisons. We wish to work together with people, and indeed we have a liaison with Industry 4.0 and ISA and the various IEEE, JTC, whatever, the whole series of acronyms. I can't remember any of them. But anyway, so the focus that we have is less on specifically manufacturing and specifically Germany, which of course the German entity is focused on, but rather interoperability. So we're working in healthcare, very apropos at the moment, of course, manufacturing, mining, automotive, and so on and so forth. We foresee, and I think everybody does this, that these will be connected. Will be manufacturing components that go into electric cars that then need to be connected to the grid. How are you going to make all of these things work together? Could you, in fact, not only connect to the grid, but have your car, which has a vast number of computers in it, it's a network on wheels really, search for extraterrestrial intelligence, who knows? So what we're thinking of at this point, now that we're 7 years old, which is 49 dog years and 343 technology years, is that we have changed our name to Industry IoT Consortium. We are much more focused now on deployments. We are searching for pain points that people see in their specific industry. We are working also on patterns that we can then apply to those different areas. And we're trying to make those connections. We will be publishing very shortly a paper, excuse me, a paper that discusses digital transformation in practice based on the 7 years of test beds that we've been running. And we can see now a progression so that one facility leads into another. And that helps everybody, I think, understand how these things are going to go together. And that brings me to my last point, business models. Not only is this a technological thing, it's a business model thing. I live in Southern California. That's why it's dark behind me. It's 6 o'clock in the morning. And I know this is probably illegal, but I don't own a car in Southern California. What do I do? Well, I use ride-sharing services. Instead of having several tens of thousands of dollars sitting downstairs in the garage doing nothing, except maybe searching for extraterrestrial intelligence, I just pay someone to drive me where I want to go. And this is a big change, and that's only the beginning. We're going to see a lot more customization of manufacturing. We're going to see batch size 1. We're going to see all sorts of different models whereby we are working on services. We're selling less in terms of assets, but more in terms of outcomes. And there's an excellent paper published by the World Economic Forum in conjunction with Accenture that talks about these different phases going from asset efficiency to services and all the way up then to outcomes. So that's where we're focused. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Honestly, it's clear that we could have a day-long discussion about these various points. We've touched on the importance of supply chain as well as humanity, as well as the challenges that each part of the entire ecosystem faces. And if we tie in some of the policy discussions from before, we can see that the pandemic has also allowed for increased challenges, but also some opportunities. So the way that I would like to ask this next set of questions is to sort of group folks together. And we'll start first with Mr. Han, Mr. Badra, and Dr. Linder. We'll ask our questions and then in turn have you answer the questions. So Mr. Han, what is the role of established tech companies and startups in Industry 4.0? What kind of collaboration do you see between the two? And how do you kind of think about those relationships as you build a global ecosystem?
Okay, I will try to answer. I understood regarding startups and collaboration. You know, I have explained before, and I can only 100% confirm also from the company perspective, the change of mindset and so on, what is needed, what before is needed. So I think for startups, I think we have two dimensions. One is where we are now speaking a little bit about platform industry for the OC initiative. I can also speak about Siemens, but I will focus, let's say, a little bit more on the industry 4.0 ground or the platform industry 4.0 ground. You know, we have two challenges. First of all, you know, the waste of the businesses based on small and medium-sized enterprises, which you have to bring to this digitalization technology. So you have to look how in doing this. Stephen Meller mentioned before the test beds, I think it was what you mentioned, to bring them inside, to train them, to help them and learning about new business models, and of course using also technologies also for traditional business models. When you're looking about new business models, for sure regarding startups, startup centers, because they have also the mindset to think in new ideas. Stephen mentioned before no car using ride sharing possibility. This is ideas are coming from the startups companies, or I can tell you also from our company where we acquired also for low-code programming and former startup. Don't ask me 5-10 years in the market, which bringing immediately as a flavor on this. Also in a nutshell, asking me, you have to look how you really bring, let's say, the broad community regarding small and medium sizes with you. So that's one target which we have, and Markus has mentioned this also in the previous discussion about the expanding the network. And the second issue also especially regarding new ideas and new flavors, or thinking about also possibility to get app development to use this for making more efficient on a Industry 4.0 platform, where we are looking heavily in the startup communities. That's, let's say, first intro, not to waste too much time.
No, thank you very much. And Mr. Badra, how are you seeing investments in not working obviously with startups, but with an eye toward how they become enterprises and that kind of collaboration?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think that a bunch of us have touched on the fact that you know, none of our efforts is an island, and that we have to work with an ecosystem of both existing incumbents who have provided technology to the manufacturing and industrial sector, as well as governments and sort of other bodies that are encouraging the adoption of Industry 4.0 across industries. And so I think there are probably 2 or 3 things that I think we could be doing better, and where we're excited about actually a partnership. So one is that, you know, the capital goods providers like, you know, like Siemens or Honeywell or others have been true partners, you know, to manufacturing and industrial sectors across the world today. And, you know, it is actually their interest in Industry 4.0 and their educating of their clients and customers that paves the way for startups to actually work with these larger organizations. I think that's definitely number one. On the flip side, you know, the buying pattern and the business model is changing, as Stephen Miller talked about. You know, instead of CapEx, you know, these companies are now have to shift to the idea of investing in OpEx, because so many of these software and services are sort of, you know, produced as and purchased as a service rather than a sort of a one-time CapEx. And that's a mindset shift that has to happen. And then finally, you know, Patrick talked about, you know, pilot purgatory. And I think that part of this stems from the fact that, you know, boards and senior management of actual industrials companies have to adopt a very sort of deterministic roadmap for how they want to digitize their own operations. so that there aren't a lot of like, random experiments that sort of waste the time of startups, but actually really focused initiatives that are strategic and that are driving top and bottom line for these industries. And that's perhaps the best way in which startups can partner with larger companies and actually find clients and actually get into production and move beyond pilot purgatory. And I think that those are perhaps the three largest challenges and also opportunities ahead of us.
Cool. Thank you. Dr. Linder, as a CEO of two startups, how do you and your company work well with other established enterprises?
Well, the best partnerships happen because customers are seeing value and more or less asking us and more traditional vendors to work together. And the reason is very simple. Like, no one walks in, and especially in brownfield environment, into an operational environment, and there's nothing there. There's always something, whether it's the current way of doing things, the systems that were implemented before, and really what drives this is their need to get quick return on investment because they're trying to solve some kind of a real problem. Examples of real problems could be things like, hey, we need to increase capacity on this line in 2 months, or the quality issues on that value stream need to drop by X amount of time, by X until this time. And what we're seeing is that it really becomes a data game. Okay, so let me give you a concrete example. Like a system like Tulip comes along that is really engaging people on the shop floor, and they're building apps. Just to give you some magnitude around this, about past 12 months, something I think like crossing 20,000 apps that customers built. And so they generate combined, over 100 million application runs, which is basically something a human being has done on the shop floor with this thing. So what do you do with all this data? Some of it needs to end up in an ERP, helping count labor rates. Some of it needs to end up in the MES, counting, towards, inventory or catching, defect rate or something like that. And so to move all this data, you have to interface systems, and to do that, that's typically in the past fallen into, classic heavy complex system integration. And by companies like Tulip, which is a startup that is built with more modern architecture, open interfaces, things like that, to through a customer need integrate into one of the existing systems, basically gives more value both to the traditional systems, give it additional life, and obviously solves the customer problem. And then once the customers can use the data, there's really one thing that customers are telling me, and I'm generalizing, has a lot of variance, but the essence is very simple. It's like, we're not willing to go back to being blind. We hear a lot about, oh, data is the new oil, and it's like big words, but the reality is, like, when and I know we have some German folks here, and I want to be clear that this is not a union thing. When you can say, these are my best people, okay, and these are the most trained, and these are the people I need to help, you're actually helping your workforce. And not having this, like, imagine organization A has this data, and organization B does not have this data. Who can be more competitive? So it's really simple. So that's where I see the main value of working together.
It's excellent, and it is about competition, and it is about bringing the people to the industry as well. And Mr. McKinley and Dr. Buehler, speaking of people, how can robots and humans work more closely with each other as adoption of these Industry 4.0 technologies increase? And also, how does this cooperation between the two help investments actually succeed? There's clearly a tension there, but between the two of you, I feel like you can address that. Dr. Buehler.
So should I start? Okay. Yeah, first of all, there are basically two approaches how to bring those two together. First of all is upskilling the workforce, reskilling the workforce, bringing them to the right skills to be able to work with the current systems we are having, or with the system we're expecting to have in 5 or 10 years. And that's something we definitely need to tackle. Is we're having a lot of robots already in operation. They are expected, so the average lifetime of a robot, of a traditional robot, is about 12 years. So the robots that are now newly installed this year, they will last for the next 12 years. So we need people that are able to work with those robots over the next 12 years. That's the first thing. So we really have to continuously adapt the workforce. We have to get people to acknowledge that they really have to work on lifelong learning. So I think for the younger generation, it might be more obvious that you have to learn new things every year and every day. So it's basically, I never stop learning, I think, in my job so far. And we have to get the wide workforce to that point as well. And the second part is to actually work on the technology that makes it easier for people to use them. And I think both is happening at the same time. They are great ideas, especially from startups. So that's where startups come in back to the discussion, that have great ideas that make the life easier and help actually to teach the robots and to program robots, make it easier. So less skills or different skills, maybe easier to adapt skills, can be acquired over time.
Mr. McKinley.
Yeah, absolutely. Nathan mentioned brownfield installations. That means when we're going into an existing facility that already has some processes there and we're trying to automate that. Greenfield implementations are when we're trying to bring up a system from the ground up. In my experience, brownfield implementations are far more common, and we've been involved in a lot more of those than greenfield implementations. And when that happens, there are always people there already whom are going to interact with the new robots that are being brought on, and it represents a disruption in their existing way of life. So there's always a latent tension there that we have to overcome. And in the greenfield operations that do exist, I've noticed that there have been almost zero attempts to do true lights out implementations, which means that there are no people involved whatsoever. That only is applicable for a very, very tiny amount of use cases for certain semiconductor automation processes or things where people just cannot go. So where I'm getting at is you need to have consideration for human factors and ergonomics of the people who are going to use this system every single day. And you have to realize that if we want robots to be flexible, as Suzanne indicated in her opening statements, we have to rely on people to actually create that flexibility. So in my experience, the most successful implementations have been the ones where we go out and directly talk to the workers first and say, hey, what really is terrible about your job currently, and how can we make it better? You know, we're here for you, the workers who are here already. And if we can succeed in doing that, then this entire implementation is going to be successful. If we don't succeed in doing that right off the bat, then I have seen instances, not with my own technology, but where other people's technology have been sabotaged or crashed into walls, or there's been latent tensions between workers and technology that wasn't communicated properly to them from the beginning, that eventually leads to pilot purgatory and leads to poor adoption and leads to failure of entire companies.
Well, that is certainly also a consideration when you have so much money going into the investment of the robots, of the technology. You need to ensure that type of stuff doesn't happen, right? Shifting slightly, Mr. Van den Bosch and Mr. Meller, what are your expectations for investment in Industry 4.0 for the next coming years? Like, how are you seeing these ideas shift and adoption grow? And you mentioned some statistics early that Mr. Van den Bosch, that it's been very slow to kind of pick up, but we know in general, investment in technology has been quite aggressive. So perhaps it's just a matter of understanding what technologies feed into investment 4.0, et cetera. And Mr. Miller, for you, it's obviously, it is a rebranding, right? It's a redefining the technologies as we're progressing. So why don't you go ahead?
Yes, I think the biggest issue is not in the technology at all. It's organizational, and it boils down to risk. If I go into a factory or oil refinery or whatever, and I say I can improve your efficiency by 10%, everyone will say, well, that's lovely, that's great. And then we discuss it a little bit more, and then they realize that there's a 0.05% that the factory will be down for a month. Suddenly they lose interest, and quite reasonably as well. risk for companies of this order, and in terms of the size of investment that they have already made, means that they are very risk averse. They want to be sure that they have seen an implementation succeed, and moreover, succeed in your industry. And a 1995 book by Geoffrey Moore, Crossing the Chasm, talks about that a lot. You have to be able to show this worked in your competitor, basically, in your industry. And then you can say, okay, we have to make that work for you, and be very clear about what those risks are and what it means should you fail. Now, of course, that does mean pilots, and I've learned a new term here today, pilot purgatory. I like that a lot. I'll be using it. But it does mean that you have to start small, and it means, moreover, that you have to build on what you have already done. That really is key. If you can't do that, then you can't really change the business, and you can't get the kind of digital transformation that you're looking for. Thank you.
Yeah, and in terms of what we see in future investments, I think it's definitely going to go up. But the big question that all my clients are struggling with is, okay, I'm opening my pocketbook, but where am I going to invest? Because there are so many technologies and potential applications that are evolving so quickly that they're trying to figure out, what do I prioritize, right? And with COVID and the trade wars going on, there's very little appetite, as Stephen was saying, for stuff that hasn't been tested. So they want practical technology solutions to help them grapple with the demand volatility, mitigate these supply chain shocks, build resiliency into the business, and so on and so on. So our clients are asking us for a realistic view as to how mature these technologies really are, because there is a lot of hype in these things and a lot of startups with big promises, and some of these are really cool and come to fruition, others don't, right? So we're trying to gather as many insights and learnings on an ongoing basis to keep the pulse of what's going on, so that we can help our clients. We actually launched a digital model factory in Detroit together with LIFT, which is one of those National Manufacturing Innovation Institutes that have been spawned by previous administrations here in the US. And we have an ecosystem of technology partners in there, including some of Nathan's colleagues from Tulip, actually. And it basically is intended to show companies how things can be stringed together instead of creating this pilot and pilot and pilot and so on and so on. And so we're giving them hands-on demonstrations and accessing latest technology and bring to life how it all works. Now, one thing, frankly, that I haven't made up my mind yet is, if it is such a great thing that all these technologies are becoming cheaper, because one perverse implication of that is that the approval limits in organizations are sinking lower down in the organization. So as a result, you're actually at risk of a lot more people putting pieces of a puzzle in place that ultimately doesn't fit the big picture. And so, to Sandeep's point, there is a need for a roadmap, but and that you inherently are going to get when you're talking about big dollars. When you're talking about a lot of little dollars, a person in a plant can approve $20,000, right? But they can't approve $20 million. So there's a little bit of a risk here that if that roadmap isn't defined up front, that companies are going to continue to get even worse with the pilot purgatory situation and less connected. So I'm very aware of that in conversations with clients to alert them to that fact. And so I guess the other thing too is, there's a lot of talk about a vision around this. And my point to that is, it's great to have a vision, but visionaries have to pay the bills too, right? And so one of the things that, again, coming back to that point on ROI, that we all, the industry and us, can continue to do a better job at, is putting realistic ROIs in front of clients, because that'll help them make these decisions, and that'll accelerate, because the pocketbooks are open. Make no mistake about it. People are looking to invest. To the extent that we can all collectively make that easier for them and clearer, I think that'll benefit all of us.
Thank you, Patrick. That really brings up another issue that I think is key in this area, and that is that large industrial organizations tend to think in terms of large multi-decade investments. And what we need to be able to do in this, because we're all still learning, is to make a series of small investments, fail fast if you fail, succeed quickly as well, and then scale that as much as you can. So that's another organizational barrier, I think, to investment in this area, because it's just not in the culture. So the idea that, yes, we'll do this, it's small, it's tiny, we'll make it work or not, and then we'll have another look at something else. And of course, that roadmap needs to evolve and be iterated on so that you can see how it is that you learn. We did publish a business strategy and innovation framework that discusses many of these issues, including creating in your organization a center of excellence that knows about these technologies so that you can deploy them in multiple places. Thanks.
I would like to add one quick point on, because just to tie the two, because when you're dealing with citizen development, you're fundamentally dealing with two things. One is the heterogeneous nature, because if you think about a large company, it has multiple sites, maybe some came from M&A, they each have different things, they're making different things, and have different people, different cultures. So you need on one hand autonomy at the lowest level, but it doesn't mean you need to sacrifice orchestration and governance. And you know what's great for orchestration and governance? The cloud, because it allows you to centralize all the things and provide a view to executive leadership that actually guides through change management, like Patrick mentioned. Like when I go see customers, this is like 50% of the battle is not technology, is change management. But the nice thing about when you're making stuff visible in data, and I'll give you like one little anecdote about it, is that that orchestration is emergent. And the example, the anecdote is, we have this thing called Tulip University, and some executive running those COEs, indeed, like Stephen mentioned, COEs is like, we keep hearing this. They say like, we're not going to let people play with the toys unless they have a certain amount of folks in the site going through Tulip University. So they set up a baseline, and then they release guidelines and design patterns and different names for that, and they track. And so they can start comparing sites, and they can start deciding on like, okay, we saw this site make this template, let's give it to that site. And this is not a brave new world. This is happening now. And I know we need roadmaps and all that kind of stuff, but I'm of course supportive and want to help and contribute. But I guess my message is that this is here and now, like this situation. And anybody who wants to learn about this, like let me know. I can talk about this all day long. You can probably tell.
It's certainly an urgent area, and centers of excellence in the governance. Dr. Beeler, what are you seeing as well? Like, how are you working closely with companies and organizations to try to make sure that this is done in a really sane way, a predictable way?
I mean, what we're facing is our clients are the robot manufacturers, so they are designing the systems, but we are also aware that the customers are someplace else. So I think that's kind of bringing everybody to the table. We really have to tackle that skills issue. We also, what we are currently facing is the large companies are used to using robots. There are still some areas where we see that we still have to work on how to get the application or the production step automated. And there's still some issues that are really hard to really realize. But we also see that that there are users or user groups of that was already said, that where it's not yet automated, the sectors that are not yet automated, say for example food and beverage industry, they are not yet used to automate their processes. They have to rethink their whole production cycles in order to be able to adapt technology, and that's where really have to bring both sides together. So it's usually the robot suppliers is the customers, but there is some clients in between that we call system integrators. They really have the knowledge about the robot, they have the knowledge about the processes. And that is what we actually have to work on. And we see that in countries where we see less robots deployed, we see also certain weaknesses in this kind of intermediate between the robot suppliers and the real end customers of robots. So for example, take the UK. There was a long history of getting cheap labor into the UK. So they invested to fail in this infrastructure that you need to actually deploy more robots. And as a kind of drawback now after the Brexit, they are not having that workforce anymore because a lot of people went out of the country, but the infrastructure is not yet in place. So that's what they will now have to work on. So that is from our perspective, a big chunk of work we have to dedicate is to really get that infrastructure in each country ready. And you can't just copy paste that. We hear from companies that they deployed a site in Spain, but they can't copy that to have it, say, in Romania or something. It's just not working the same way. So we have to rethink the whole process for each country.
Excellent. Thank you all very much. This has been such a great discussion today. And I would like to pass over for closing remarks to Mr. Baldwin, please.
Thank you so much. Well, that's been an extremely interesting discussion, and we've picked up a lot of points here. And we don't have much time for closing, so I'll just be extremely brief. But it's a very rich discussion to summarize in just such a short time. But I think we have all agreed that Industry 4.0 is hugely important, getting a lot of attention from policymakers, and we are seeing that certainly in the demand that is placed on us. Clearly, because public policies are very important, I think you've all agreed that and pointed that out at various points. Institutional support, digital skills development, incentives, building digital infrastructure, and the ecosystem I heard several times. So very good. And the last point, something that was said by several people on the panels, that nobody can do it alone in trying to develop or transform towards Industry 4.0. So the network is very important, and I hope that perhaps this session, apart from sharing a lot of knowledge, has also contributed a little bit to that. So with that, I would like to thank all of our panelists for joining us, for being there in this panel, and for sharing their insights and knowledge with us. Thank you very much, Laurel, for moderating this session in such an excellent way. I really appreciate it. And of course, a big thank you to the audience from around the world. As UNCTAD, we will take on board all the various suggestions that we've heard, all the various insights we've heard, and we will definitely move ahead with our work on investment in Industry 4.0. And we hope to be able to work with you again, perhaps build on your knowledge again as we do so. Thank you so much. This session is now closed.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thank you.